Have you ever had one of those nights where you wake up for no reason at all? The house is quiet, the world outside is still, but something doesn't feel right. You lie there, staring into the darkness, convincing yourself that the chill creeping up your spine is nothing. That you're safe. That it's all in your head. I've been there. I've told myself those same things. But what if I told you that feeling isn't always wrong? What if the silence hides something? Something watching, waiting, just beyond what your eyes can see. I know what it's like to feel your heartbeat in your throat as you force yourself to check the empty hallway. To feel frozen in place, torn between staying under the covers or facing whatever might be there. But what if the moment you decide to move, you hear it? A whisper. A creak in the floorboards. A door closing softly on its own. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories. Stories from people who felt that same cold dread, but unlike most of us, they couldn't ignore it. They couldn't explain it. What happened to them was real, and it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about what's safe, what's real, and what's lurking in the dark. I need you to listen carefully because these aren't just stories. These are accounts from people who never believed in ghosts, until they had no choice. The first story takes us to a quiet farmhouse where a young couple was forced to confront a chilling presence they could not escape. And the last story? The last story will leave you unsettled long after the video ends. A doll so cursed, so terrifying, that even those who dared to touch it now live with scars they can't explain. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end. The truth is, ghosts aren't just stories. Ghosts are real. And tonight, you'll see why. Story 1, The Haunted Farmhouse. Our first story takes us to a desolate farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. It was supposed to be a fresh start. A young couple, Jack and Emily, moved in with dreams of renovating the old property and building a life far away from the chaos of the city. But sometimes, isolation is not the escape we hope for. Sometimes, it becomes a trap. From the moment they arrived, neighbors warned them. Whispers of strange lights, unusual noises, and the unnerving sensation of being watched surrounded the house's history. But Jack and Emily brushed it off. They were skeptical, determined to make the house their home. That is, until the house began to fight back. The first night, they heard it. Faint at first, like the soft tapping of footsteps above their heads. Jack dismissed it, saying it was just the old house settling. But Emily wasn't so sure. The sound was too deliberate, too steady, as if someone was pacing in the attic. Days later, the real terror began. Jack left the kitchen to find the front door wide open, despite having locked it minutes earlier. He closed it, only for it to slam shut with such force it rattled the windows. Emily heard the sound from upstairs and rushed down, only to find Jack pale and trembling. But the worst came late one night. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch while Jack worked in the garage. She woke to the feeling of being watched. She turned her head, and there it was. A figure. Standing in the corner of the room, staring at her. It didn't move, didn't speak. She couldn't see its face, just the dark outline of its body. Frozen with fear, she screamed, and the figure vanished as Jack ran inside. Jack thought the worst was over, but he was wrong. One night, he woke up to find Emily's side of the bed empty. He searched the house frantically, calling her name, but she was gone. Then, through the window, he saw her. Standing in the middle of the field, barefoot, staring back at the house. Her eyes were blank, her face expressionless. The next day, while clearing out the attic, they found it, a dusty old journal buried under loose floorboards. The entries were chilling. Written by the previous owner, they described encounters with an angry spirit. The entries became increasingly erratic, ending abruptly with a single, scrawled warning, "It won't let us leave." Jack and Emily didn't wait to find out what the spirit wanted. They packed their belongings and left that very night. But the house wasn't done with them. Even miles away, Emily swore she could still hear it, the whispers. They followed her, creeping into her dreams, seeping into the silence of their new home. She never felt safe again. To this day, the farmhouse remains abandoned. Locals still report seeing flickering lights in the windows and hearing muffled voices in the night. Some say it's just an old house creaking under the weight of time. Others know better. Story 2, The Forgotten Asylum. Our next story takes us to the outskirts of London, where an abandoned asylum has stood untouched for decades. Built in the late 1800s, it was once a place of hope, promising treatment for the mentally ill. But what happened within those walls was anything but healing. Patients were subjected to cruel and inhumane treatments, electroshock therapy, forced isolation, and even experimental surgeries. Many didn't survive. And some? They simply disappeared, their names erased from records, their fates a mystery. By the 1970s, the asylum was shut down. Officially, it was due to budget cuts. Unofficially, the staff couldn't explain the strange occurrences. Whispers in empty rooms, screams that echoed through the halls at night, and shadows that moved when no one was there. Today, the asylum is forgotten, except by those brave, or foolish, enough to explore its haunted halls. A group of urban explorers decided to film their adventure in the asylum. At first, it was exciting, just another creepy, abandoned building to document for their channel. But that excitement quickly turned to fear. As they walked through the decaying halls, they heard it. A soft, faint cry. It sounded far away, like it was coming from deep within the building. They called out, thinking it might be someone in trouble, but the crying stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. Undeterred, they pushed further into the asylum, filming everything. It was then that one of them, Mark, froze in place. His camera was fixed on a doorway down the hall. "Did you see that?" he whispered. The others crowded around him, replaying the footage. There, just for a second, was a shadowy figure moving past the doorway. They ran to check, but the hallway was empty. In one of the rooms, they found something chilling. An old hospital bed with rusted restraints, as though someone had been tied down and left there. But that wasn't the worst part. Across from the bed was a mirror, its surface covered in deep, jagged scratches. At first, it seemed random, but as they looked closer, they realized the scratches spelled out two words, "Help me." Then, things took a terrifying turn. As they explored deeper into the asylum, one of them, Chris, went missing. One minute he was there, and the next, he was gone. They called his name, their voices echoing off the walls, but there was no response. After several minutes, they found him in a dark corner of a room they hadn't entered yet. He was sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth, muttering the same phrase over and over, "The woman in white. She's watching me." Shaken, they decided to leave immediately. But when they reviewed the footage later that night, they found something that chilled them to their core. In several frames, just behind them, was the silhouette of a woman in a long, white dress. Her face was blurry, her features distorted, but her hollow eyes stared directly at the camera. The explorers swore they would never return to the asylum. But for one of them, the nightmare didn't end there. Mark, the one who first spotted the shadowy figure, began hearing footsteps in his home at night. They would start outside his bedroom door, pacing back and forth, before stopping suddenly. He never saw anyone, but sometimes, in the dead of night, he would hear a soft whisper, "Help me." The asylum still stands today, abandoned and forgotten. But for those who dare to enter, beware. Because not everyone who walks through its halls comes out the same, if they come out at all. Story 3, The Cursed Doll. Our final story takes us to an unassuming antique shop in a small town. Among its cluttered shelves of forgotten relics sat an old porcelain doll, its presence unnerving, even to those who didn't believe in the supernatural. The doll had lifeless glassy eyes, staring into nothingness, and its face was cracked, as if time itself had tried to erase it. But what made it truly disturbing were the faint, dark streaks running from its eyes to its chin. It looked as if the doll had been crying. The doll sat there for years, overlooked by most customers, until one fateful day, a young family decided to bring it home, unknowingly unleashing a nightmare they would never forget. The Turner family, Mark, his wife Linda, and their 8-year-old daughter Emily, were browsing the antique shop one weekend. Emily, fascinated by the doll, begged her parents to buy it. Mark hesitated. Something about the doll unsettled him, but Linda brushed it off as silly. "It's just a doll," she said, smiling. So, they bought it, never realizing the darkness they were bringing into their home. At first, everything seemed normal. But within days, strange things started happening. The doll, which Emily kept on a shelf in her room, seemed to move on its own. Linda would find it lying on the floor or facing a different direction, but she assumed Emily was playing with it. Then, late at night, faint giggles began echoing through the house. Emily insisted it wasn't her, and Mark began waking up at odd hours, feeling like someone was watching him. One night, Emily told her parents something that sent chills down their spines. She said the doll had spoken to her. "She told me bad things are coming," Emily whispered. Linda laughed nervously, but Mark felt his blood run cold. "What bad things?" he asked. Emily shrugged and said, "She didn't say. But she said I shouldn't tell you." The family decided they'd had enough. Mark placed the doll in a box and left it at a local donation center. But when they woke up the next morning, it was sitting on their living room couch, its head tilted, as if mocking them. "Who brought it back?" Mark yelled, but no one had an answer. That night, Mark woke up to a heavy weight on his chest. He opened his eyes to see the doll sitting on him, its glassy eyes inches from his face. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. It was as if something was holding him down. The doll's cracked mouth opened slightly, and he heard a faint whisper, "Why did you leave me?" When Mark finally managed to push it off, the doll hit the floor, and the room went silent. But for the rest of the night, he could hear faint footsteps pacing outside his bedroom door. The next morning, Mark burned the doll in their backyard, watching as the flames consumed its porcelain face. But even as it turned to ash, Mark swore he heard faint giggles and saw the outline of the doll's face in the smoke. The family hoped that would be the end of it. For weeks afterward, the Turners were plagued by nightmares. Each of them saw the doll in their dreams, standing at the foot of their beds, watching them. Emily woke up screaming one night, saying the doll had told her it was coming back. The family eventually moved, leaving the house, and their nightmares, behind. But to this day, Mark can't shake the feeling that they haven't seen the last of the doll. Experts have speculated that the doll was cursed, possibly by its original owner. But its true origin? That remains a mystery. And if you ever come across a doll with cracks like tear stains and lifeless eyes that seem to follow you, you might want to leave it behind. Just in case. These stories remind us that the line between the living and the dead is thinner than we dare to believe. Shadows that move when they shouldn't, whispers in the night when no one is around. Perhaps these are just fragments of our imagination. Or perhaps they are echoes of a world we don't fully understand. We've explored a haunted farmhouse where love turned into terror, an asylum where history refuses to rest, and a cursed doll that shattered the Turner family's reality. But these tales are not just stories, they are warnings. Warnings that the things we think we own might end up owning us. Now, I want to hear from you. Which story sent chills down your spine? Was it the farmhouse with its unseen footsteps, the asylum that held secrets in its walls, or the doll that carried a curse? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed these terrifying tales, be sure to hit the like button. It lets us know that you want more stories that will keep you awake at night. Don't forget to subscribe and join our growing community of brave souls who dare to face the unknown. And if you think these stories were unsettling, wait until next week. We'll take you to a cursed hotel where guests check in, but few stay the night. The hotel has a history so dark, even skeptics have walked away believers. You won't want to miss it.